So our moderator for this afternoon is Mr. Ken Blair. Mr. Ken Blair is a native of Warrenton, Georgia, and a graduate of Mercer University, where he earned a Bachelor of Science in Organizational Leadership and minored in Education. He earned a master's degree from Brown University in Business Administration. Ken is the director of the first year experience at Wesleyan College. Ken began his career in higher education in Mercer in 2014 as an associate director of the Office of Student Financial Planning. He later joined the Office of Student Affairs Department in 2017, serving as an educational specialist and the academic coordinator for the Mercer University Upward Bound program. Ken is an alumnus of the Educational Talent Search Trio program and currently serves as the co-chair for the Mercer University African American Alumni Network. During Ken's tenure at Mercer University, he served as an instructor for Mercer University UMB 101, a co-advisor for the Minority Mentor Program, Mercer's National Panhellenic Council, and Women, a campus organization. He's also a Golden Key Honor Society member and served on the Student Affairs Assessment Committee. Ken was nominated for the Outstanding UMB 101 Instructor of the Year Award and was recognized at Mercer University's Faculty Staff Spotlight in 2019. Currently, he serves as an instructor for Wesleyan's WISE 101 and serves as a Student Success Committee member. So I'd now like to turn it over to Mr. Ken Blair, who is the co-chair for the Mercer University African American Alumni Association Network, and he will be your moderator for this afternoon. Well, he will introduce our panelists for this evening. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Dr. Booker, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I really appreciate this opportunity to serve as the moderator for tonight's event. As she shared, I will be introducing our speakers. So we're going to go ahead and get tonight's event started. The story of Sam Ani. The story of Sam is not just one of courage, but also of patience and integrity. As an African missionary convert from Ghana, he may have seemed to be an unlikely crusader for integration, but he helped Mercer challenge racist Southern traditions to find its institutional conscience. Sam began his experience at Mercer University in September in 1963 in Macon, Georgia, when it became the integrated admission. Mercer University in Macon became integrated when it granted him admission in 1963. The first day at Mercer for Sam was not the regular for most college students. He was not met with a giant group of violent protesters or armed guards. Instead, he walked along the campus towards his dorm room, only to be met with indifferent or displeasing stares. Throughout his time at Mercer, the stares never ceased. Although Sam was involved on campus in student organizations, such as writing for the cluster, he was still not accepted among his fellow students. Despite these obstacles, he had a giant effect on Mercer and the very community that did not accept him. Sam certainly experienced more at Mercer than the typical college student. After this faith-based shattering experience, Sam graduated from Mercer with a degree in sociology, and he vowed never to return to Georgia. He then went on to graduate school at the University of California to study journalism. After graduating from Berkeley with his master's in journalism, he returned to Nigeria. He started Project Plowshare, the non-government organization focusing on rural development. I welcome Mr. Sam Ani. Next, our speaker is Dr. Holmes. Born and raised in Columbus, Georgia, Christopher is the youngest of two brothers and two sisters. He has a passion for education and advocates for high quality and equitable education for Black, Brown, and low SES students through his consulting firm, Fully Engaged Education and Resources. He utilized his talents so that students, teachers, school, and LEAs experience success, eliminate barriers, and meet realistic goals for achievement outcomes. Educational advocacy, training, and coaching are all opportunities to stress the importance of education across the globe at a diverse classroom. Giving consideration to race, gender, sex, culture, religious affiliation, demographics, and disabilities, we believe that education is not only a necessity, but an opportunity to foster growth via diversity and inclusion. Education for Dr. Holmes.
Okay, you ready, Coach? Come inside.
I'll ask that all guests, please mute your line. All guests, please
We
make
got to go ahead and
your line is muted. Thank you. His education for Dr. Holmes, University of Georgia, where he just recently received his Doctor of Philosophy, Educational Administration and Policy. He earned his master's degree and specialist degree from Troy University and his master's degree from Troy University and his BS degree from Mercer University. Let's give it up for Dr. Holmes, you guys. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start our cover.
One moment. We ask again that if you are an attendee, that you please mute your phone. Have someone that is not muted. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Booker. So now we will begin the conversation, or the dialogue as we call it, uncomfortable conversations with a Black man. This first question is for you, Mr. Sam. Please describe your experience desegregating Mercer University in 1963.
Well, again, I want to thank you for this rare opportunity to fellowship with you and share ideas and experiences that we had at and continue to have at Mercer University. My coming to Mercer was by no means by happenstance or by accident. I came out of the conviction that an institution of high learning that is faith-based or connected with the Christian faith ought to open its doors to all of God's children. And as some of you may know, I was born and brought up in Ghana. That used to be the British colony of Gold Coast. And it was as the Gold Coast marched towards independence in 1957, that the Southern Baptist missionaries began to arrive. And that's when I met them. And incidentally, that was about the time that the civil rights movement in this country, in the United States, was also beginning to gather steam. And so these two pivotal events galvanized me as well as a very curious and inquisitive youngster. And I began asking these Southern Baptists, the first Americans that I ever came to know, about the civil rights situation in the United States. Let me stop here. I think the instruction was for us to speak for a couple of minutes for openers, and then develop this topic. When I get to my next turn.
you. The next question is for Dr. Holmes. Describe your experience at Mercer University in the early 2000s and the growth of the Black students on Mercer's campus.
Well, thank you again for having me. It's such a privilege to be on a panel with Mr. Oni, somebody I've always looked up to, with one of my best friends being a mentee of his, Ola Shaney, and also one of my frat brothers. It's a privilege to be here with you. And now knowing you went to Berkeley, now he's at Berkeley now. So, once again, I don't know if that was happenstance, but I think you made that choice very wisely. But let me say, in the 2000s, I went to Mercer once again intentionally, just like Mr. Oni, coming from an all-Black high school. I wanted a different experience, and I knew that I needed to be surrounded around a diverse group of individuals, much like the one I anticipated myself working in. The experience at Mercer was very interesting in that I was very comfortable in the space with other cultures, but I definitely felt an unease as others were around me, which was new to me. And it really came to light in my first year experience class, which I really appreciate the opportunity to have that class, because people really were able to come forward and be very transparent about their history, about their beliefs and their values. And now, did I see Confederate flags hanging in windows? Yes. Was that a norm where I was from? Not at all. I knew what it represented. I knew what those who maybe flew them thought about somebody that looked like me. And so I knew I was going to face some challenges as it related to race. But there was a mixed bag of tricks, so to speak. There were those who had gone to high school with African-American students and those of Asian descent or Latinx, and they were very comfortable with everybody. And then we had those that were from very small rural towns. And that's when I realized Georgia was really a rural state. And there were many people at Mercer who had never gone through any K-12 education with a Black person at all. And a lot of their beliefs were based on what they saw on television or what they saw on the news. And I remember one particular situation, a classmate of mine, very wonderful, nice girl from North Georgia. And not trying to be offensive, she walked up to me after class and she said, "Chris, I just want to tell you, you have the best posture of any Black person I've ever met." And in my mind, I think she believed that I was supposed to be walking humped over in an ape-like fashion. But I couldn't even be upset because I knew it was ignorance. And it was because she had no experiences, and it was all based on this belief of what she was taught or what was shared in her small community. And so that was just one of the many experiences I had at Mercer that really shed light on how people really believed. Black people may have been inferior or may not need to be at Mercer, or just really had a lot of trepidation with interactions with those that look like me.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes, for that answer. I like it. I'm loving this because I'm seeing the comparison and I'm seeing the difference on both of you guys' experience. You got Mr. Oni, you were there in 1963, and then you, Chris, in the early, Dr. Holmes, you in the early 2000s, and I'm still hearing similarities. So this is getting good, guys. This is getting good. Question one is going to be open to both panelists, and that question is, what are your emotional thoughts when being stopped by the police? As we know that we're moving forward into this era with the police brutality and everything that has transpired and that is still going on against African-American men today. What are you guys' thoughts or your emotional thoughts when being stopped by the police?
There is, of course, an underlying sense of apprehension and the assumption that an encounter with the police can be positive, but it can also be disastrous. It could result in death. So one, for speaking for myself, I tend to be on my guard, and also try to avoid any kind of encounter, because if you don't have the prior encounter that may then develop into something horrific, then you're safe. But one relives the many encounters that one has through the media, witness of Black people, young Black men, young Black women encountering the policemen and giving up, ending up giving up their lives as a result of that encounter. As it happened not too long ago, I've forgotten in what state, a young man was murdered in cold blood for jaywalking. And I think we're about this is the first year anniversary of Ahmaud Arbery, right here in Georgia, in broad daylight, cold-blooded murder. Breonna Taylor. And then it's even difficult to bring up his name. The young fellow in the park in Cleveland, 12 years of age, was gunned down by the police barely seconds after they encountered him. So there is always that panic, that existing apprehension, I should say, and that I guess can be life-preserving. One just hopes that each one of us will commit to the bringing about the sort of change that is desperately needed in this country, whereby this kind of these kinds of horrific experiences on the part of Black young men and women will be eliminated once and for all.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Holmes, do you have anything you would like to add?
You know, if I were going to describe a fear and I want to be nice about it, I would say my initial answer would be one of uncertainty, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know the mindset or perceptions of the officer that you're going to interact with. And that could be either Black or white. If I was going to be transparent, I would say my answer would be fear. And I can be honest in saying that I have come full circle in my thought of this. And let me explain why I say that. When I was younger, of course, I was taught how to interact with police. If I was ever stopped by the police, what to do, how to respond, hands on the wheel, no eye contact, listen to what they tell you to do, follow directions, no quick movement, right? And that was, 18, 19, 20. Later on in my 20s, early 30s, I felt like I had done enough in life that I would have better interactions. I had gone to school, gotten degrees, involved myself in social networks where I had built relationships with all types of people, that maybe somebody would know me when they stopped me, that I wouldn't have a negative interaction. And as of the last few years, due to social media, and thank God for that, the level of exposure that has been brought to Black people's issues and interactions that lead to death, despite sex, despite gender, despite socioeconomic class, all of those things, despite age, it has brought me back to this feeling of fear. Because at one time it was the thought that, well, you would have a negative interaction if you have drugs on you, or you would have a negative interaction that may lead to death if you have a gun in your possession, or maybe if you don't follow directions while you're driving. Well, now it's you may have a fake gun, or they may believe that you have a weapon in your car, or you simply may be jogging in somebody's neighborhood that does not want you there. And so it's quite unsettling because you don't know what to do now as a Black man and feel safe.
Both shared some very vital information. And I can only just imagine, as some of our guests are on the line, we have mothers, we have grandmothers, and, what do we tell our little Black boys? How do we prepare them? And I know that's not one of the questions, but, it's something that I think about daily. I can remember dropping my brother off for college at Fort Valley State University and reminding him that you need to be in the right place at the right time. And I then cut myself off and said, well, Ken, sometimes you can be in the right place at the right time. Guess what? Doing the right thing, and things can still happen. And so, it's just, sometimes it's just unbearable, or you just don't know what to share with our younger generations on dealing with police, because it seems like what you tell them and the things that we think is right, it doesn't always play in our efforts or in our favor. So thank you guys so much for sharing. We're going to move to our next question here. And we're going to stay on this. So describe your experiences with, or your experience with racism in America. We'll start off with you, Dr. Holmes.
So I've got two stories, and I'll try to keep them short, that I want to share. The first story was I was in the second grade, and I had a group of friends, and we were all going to go to the county fair, and I'm from Columbus. And there were two boys and two girls. One of the girls was biracial, Asian and Black, and then the other girl was a white girl. And this particular day, her dad, the white girl's dad, was going to drop us off at the fair. And he picked us up. I was the last person he picked up along the way. And, being kids, we're in second grade, we're having a good time. We're excited to see each other outside of school. We're all going to the fair. And I remember somebody said something funny, and I remember just laughing hysterically to the point my feet lifted off of the floor of the car and I hit the back of his seat. And I will never forget, he turned around and looked at me and he said, "Hey boy, you better watch your feet in my car." Now, I had been called a boy before, but that was the first time somebody had ever called me a boy, and I knew it was different. It was a different way that he said it. It was the tone and the intent at which he directed that to me. I knew it wasn't like my father calling me boy, or my uncle calling me boy, or somebody that I knew cared about me that said the word boy. And then 10 years later, I was in high school as a senior, and I was a cashier at Kmart. And I pride myself on great customer service, let me say that. And so I always greeted every customer with a smile. This older gentleman came in, a white gentleman, and if you believe in energies and spirit, I could tell his energy just was not akin to mine. And so I spoke, he didn't speak. Fine. I rang him up, and as he was, I gave him this total, but he didn't put the money in my hand. He put the money on the counter, and I literally had my hand open to receive the funds. He bypassed my hand and placed the money on the counter. So I politely just picked the money up. I rang it up. I put it in my register. I gave him his change. And as I was doing it, he looked at his receipt and something rang up wrong. Not my fault. I don't program the computers. I just ring them up. And when he noticed that, he said, "You are so stupid. Did you not know that this was on sale at blah, 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 blah?" And I said, "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see a price as I rang it up. That's just what came up on the computer." He said, "You know what? You just an old stupid boy." once again, boy, said in a way that was so hateful and so mean. And now at this point, I had a voice, so I wasn't just going to take it. And so I tried to, in some way, come to resolve with him. And he went on to tell me that he was a doctor and all those things. Well, at that point, I wanted to be a physician. So I said, well, sir, I desire to be the same as you. I want to be a physician. Oh, you'll never be a doctor, boy. And he began to berate me. And I had enough sense and wherewithal at that time, I literally just walked away. And I told my manager, I said, I'm not quite sure what his issue was. Now, I knew exactly what it was. But I said, I'm not going to allow him to talk to me that way. And you can go and handle that, but I won't return until he leaves. And this is 17 years old. And I think one of the things we don't talk about is that, and there's a lot of research that will now share this, that there's a lot of trauma that we deal with and we have to carry as Black individuals, especially Black men, that we relive year after year after year. And that carries a certain level of strain and stress that contribute to many health issues, if not psychological and emotional. And so those are just two of my stories. I know I probably went over my 2 minutes, but I thought those were appropriate for the question that you asked.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Standing your ground and standing in what you believe in, even as a 17-year-old. I love it. Mr. Oni, do you have anything to add to that question about racism in America, your experience?
Indeed, I do. My coming to America was inspired by my desire, my Christian conviction to encourage my white Southern Baptist Christians to do the right thing, to do what the Lord will have us do. Because you see, no matter how you look at it, the church has very little to do with whether your church is in the storefront or a modest church building at in middle of the town, or a cathedral, or the Vatican in Rome. The Christian faith has very little to do with that. It has very little to do whether your pastor is Pastor James or Reverend Williams or the Right Reverend Dr. Bishop, whatever. The Christian faith has to do with one thing and one thing only, and that is reconciliation. God reconciling himself to us out of his grace, his mercy, his compassion, reconciling himself with his children, and commanding you and me to go and do likewise. So that was what inspired me when I began to see Montgomery, Alabama, the boys boycott, the police dogs and fire hoses. And before that, Little Rock, Arkansas. And I remember the name of that governor. It's been years. This was in the 50s. Orval Forbes was the name of the governor of Arkansas that resisted, as George Wallace was to do later on, resisting integration of public schools, for which Black people pay their taxes to support, just as white people did. So that was my mission. That was what brought me to Mercer. I never applied to come to Mercer, but Mercer invited me to come because it was their way of trying to what's the word? To be the Southern Baptist, so the Georgia Southern Baptists, who had very close relationship with Mercer and provided substantial financial support. Am I still on? Okay, so Mercer wanted, but President Harris wanted to integrate Mercer, but he knew that he will face strong opposition from the Georgia Southern Baptists. And that was, as fate will have it, that was when the missionary by the name of Harris Mobley, who had graduated from Mercer prior to proceeding to the mission field in Ghana, where he and I became friends. He had returned home on leave, and so Mercer had invited him to come and speak to the student body. He did that, at the end of which the president then invited him to his office for a chat. And it was during the course of the conversation that President Harris made it known to the missionary that he had been wanting to integrate Mercer, but was concerned that the Georgia Southern Baptist churches will stand in opposition. And I suppose that President Harris was smart enough to know that that opposition may lead to an end to the financial support that Mercer received from the Georgia Southern Baptist. And it was at that point that the missionary said, look, we can find a way. I have a way that would enable us to circumvent that hurdle. Okay, and the way that I have in mind is to bring a product of the missionary activity in Africa to apply to Mercer. And I'm sure the Georgia Southern Baptists who will oppose the integration of Mercer will be put in a very difficult predicament. And so that was what happened. And so out of the blue, I got a letter saying that by this missionary friend of mine, that he had submitted my name to Mercer University, and that if I were to accept, I will be the first person. And he encouraged me to accept the offer, because this is the issue that he and I had talked about for a long time, and it became clear to me that my coming will be the first step in enabling the Georgia Southern Baptists, as well as other Southern Baptists in the South or other parts of the country, to see the product of their own, byproduct of their own missionary activity. So that was but I'll take a minute more to then explain to you what my first racial encounter was. I arrived on the Mercer campus as a freshman in the fall of 1963. It would have been the fall of 1962. But when word got out that Mercer was about to be integrated, the Georgia Southern Baptist churches were up in arms. Never mind that the young man to integrate Mercer was coming from the mission field. It was then that the Board of Trustees of Mercer set up a commission to recommend to it whether to integrate Mercer or not. Commission was set up, it met, and it made the recommendation that it was the right thing to do, and that Sam O'Neill to be the first student that accepted. And so I arrived in the fall of 1963, checked into my dormitory, we call it dormitory, that we know the fancy term, residence hall, room in Sherwood Hall. And a brave young man had agreed to be my roommate. Happens to be, I was to be the only Black person, and happens to be a white young man, name of Don Baxter. I moved into my dormitory room that Friday afternoon, and almost 24 hours later to the minute, there was a knock on my dormitory door. I opened the door, and standing there was this white man who proceeded to introduce himself. I am Reverend Clifton Forrester. I am the pastor of Tatnall Square Baptist Church. And Sam, I've come to let you know that you won't be welcome to worship at Tatlo Square Baptist Church come Sunday. I was dumbfounded. And I thanked him and assured him that he needn't worry that I won't be attending his church come Sunday. Now, some of you may not know that what we call Newton, is it Newton Hall? Yeah, Newton Hall, that's where Tatmo Square, that was Tatmo Square Baptist Church. And in fact, the fact that it's no longer, the church is no longer occupying that space is a result of the same racial obsession. So the church moved away from the campus because they accused the university administration as being behind my attempt. Well, that's a later story, but they ended up, so my very first baptism of fire as a person of faith, young, but with strong Christian conviction, that Tatno Square Baptist Church, which was part of the consortium of Southern Baptist churches that have been contributing to missionary work in my part of the world for over 130 years. Because the first Southern Baptist missionary to arrive in Africa arrived among my people, the Yoruba, in Nigeria, settled among them. He arrived with his wife in the year 1853. Here I am, 110 years later, 1963. And a member of the churches, one of the churches that have been supporting missionary work among my people for over 100 years, says to me, Sam, don't bother to come to try to worship in our church. And I was, as I said, so with a mixture of bewilderment and righteous indignation, I made up my mind that I won't be going to Tatno Square Baptist Church. There is another chapter to that story, but I'll stop there and tell you that later on.
Wow, thank you for sharing such vivid details. And you know, I can only imagine, as you said, being invited to come to Mercer and then getting here, and you're coming on those principles, the Southern Baptist, and you're coming faith-based and faith-minded, and then to get here and be greeted by a minister, and that's what is shared to you. Wow, such disheartening. You open up our next question, and that next question, and I'll start with you, Dr. Holmes. That next question, as a Black man, what made you pursue college?
Two answers. One, I had to, and I was going to take full advantage of the opportunity. I knew what I wanted to do in life, and I'm not saying college is for everybody, but what I wanted to do in life, I needed a college degree. And number two, I understood the fight, the blood, the energy, the tears that were shed for me, that I was not going to forfeit all of those lives and all those sacrifices and not take full advantage of all that was done to afford me the opportunity to go. And so if I could, then I was going. And that's just what I did.
I like it. If I could, I was going. Exactly what you did. And so thank you. I think as you share, it was instilled that, for some people, as you share, college may not be for everyone, but if you know your goal, your aspirations in life, you set that journey, and college is what I have to do. And so I like that, Chris. That's just ringing in my head. What about you, Mr. Oni? What made you pursue college? I know you were invited over by Mercer, but overall going to college, what were your thoughts about just attending higher education?
Yes, that's a very pertinent question for me, because I had an older brother there was another sibling, a sister between us. So he was a few years older than I, but he was so brilliant in school. And he provided the impetus, the inspiration. You know, I want to be like my older brother, go to school and earn good grades. And I suppose that was it. And by the time I finished, I was finishing secondary school. It was clear, because it was roughly a few years after Ghana had attained its independence. Now, don't be confused between Ghana and Nigeria. My parents were Nigerian, okay, who had migrated to the Gold Coast. And I'm going to confuse you even further now. They migrated to the Gold Coast only about 300 miles away from one another. So it wasn't like they were across, transversing the Atlantic. So they migrated to the Gold Coast, both of them British colonies. Okay, they were just like America used to be a British colony. The Gold Coast, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and then you go to the East Africa. Gambia also was part of this British colonies in West Africa. So I was in Ghana. Ghana had attained its independence, and that was where, as I said, I was born and gone to secondary school, equivalent of high school here, and also had given a good account of myself. Let's just leave it there. And so my teachers were encouraging me that definitely, and there was also at a juncture where Ghana becoming independent in 1957. Needed every trained mind that it could find. So scholarships were available. I graduated in '62. I'm sure Ken was about 6 or 7 years old then. Oh, he missed my joke. but so I got all the encouragement from my teachers to enroll, and I could have gone to a university in Ghana or in Nigeria, or as was the common practice in those days, students who excel usually will go to university in our colonial master's country, England. You know, go to a university in either in London, Manchester, whatever. So but for me, this was a juncture at which the crisis in America, and racial crisis in America, were going on, and I was captivated by it. And I was impelled by my Christian conviction that something, because I asked the missionaries, what was the role of the church? What in trying to bring about, live up to this great calling, namely reconciliation. And most of the missionaries with whom I raised this question were too embarrassed, because they had lived in Waycross, Georgia, and Columbia, Georgia, and Macon, Georgia, and Atlanta, Georgia, Milledgeville, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi. That was where they were from, where they had attended segregated public school. You know the rest of the story. And so ironically, it should be these are the ones that I then sent as missionaries to the slave coast, because all the countries, African countries that I mentioned to you, are along the West African coast. Also named the slave coast, West Africa. So that was where, and as I said, the first missionary by the name of Thomas Bowen, and think of irony of our ironies, was from Georgia, from Jackson County, Georgia, when he arrived in Nigeria. And Nigeria has about 300 to 400 different tribes. But among all those tribes, he could have picked a dozen other ones, but he decided to settle among the Yoruba people, who happened to be my people. And he was so well received, he and his wife, so well received. And when Mrs. Bowen delivered their first child, a little girl, they named that child after my people, Yoruba. When I read that story with a lump in my throat, that the good Lord had planned this thing and that I should be the one that I also anointed to come and return the favor. I could have gone to a school in Illinois or New York or whatever, but Georgia. And I have been thinking of going just drive through Jackson County for this reason. And I got it isn't that far from Atlanta. So I'm going to do it one of these days. So that is a story. And back to the other story about Tatnall Square Baptist Church. So Don Baxter and I, what the minister, Forrester, didn't know was that Don Baxter and I, my roommate, had made up our mind prior to his coming to see me, uninvited. We had made up our minds that Tatnall Square Baptist Church in Macon was where we were going to go worship that first Sunday. The reason for that was the minister of Tatnall Square Baptist Church, Reverend Walter Moore, had been the chairman of the committee appointed by the Board of Trustees to recommend to the university the feasibility of integrating Mercer. So Don and I assume that a minister of this position would have led his congregants to think like kind of what we use the term progressive, to lead his congregation to think likewise in the area of race relations. So church bus came on Sunday, we piled on, and then we were driven to Vanville Baptist Church. We filed into to Sunday school class. At the end of Sunday school, we came into the sanctuary for the morning worship. Nothing happened. Sermon after the sermon and the collection and all that, it's a mere formality. New visitors and people who might be considering becoming members of the church. If you've been to any Baptist church, you know what I'm talking. They're invited to line up before the congregation so that they're greeted. So all of us, about 20 of us, lined up before the congregation. The minister asked everybody to go back to their seats, except me. And then he proceeded to introduce me. Friends, we're honored to have in our midst today a young man from the mission field by the name of Sam Oni, at which point a man jumped up. Reverend Moore, I have been a member of this church for this many years, and you're about to destroy it by bringing niggers into the congregation. When he was done, a woman got up, and that woman's name is woman's face is the one that is permanently emblazoned on my consciousness, because she was all red in the face. Reverend Moore, my grandfather helped to found this church, and you're about to destroy it and I'm not going to stand for it. Simple. And a third person spoke. Cut a long story short, Reverend Moore said, let's do what the Southern Baptists pride themselves in being very democratic. Let's put the matter to a vote. All in favor of Sam Oni's membership, please raise your hand. Again, to cut the long story short, the vote was taken 3 times because the people opposed to my membership just won't agree, even though a slim margin on each occasion favored my membership. And so that was how my very first Sunday in America, among the same people who have been sponsoring missionaries, funding missionaries to my part of the world for over 110 years. And I stayed in Vanville Baptist Church for, I don't think I lasted more than a month. Because each Sunday when I would walk into that sanctuary, the hostility was palpable. And I said to myself, this nothing could be more undermining of a peaceful, worshipful spirit than this kind of atmosphere. So I stopped.
Wow, talk about a Southern welcome. Welcome to the South. Wow. Yeah. So we're gonna just move forward into some wrap-up questions.
Yes.
We're gonna go into what we call, as we know, February, and we are in what we call and what we celebrate Black History Month. And we know Black History Month has been very integral in helping paint people in a prominent light, highlighting some influential inventors, scholars, activists, and most recently, current NBA players were fighting for more recognition and exposure for Black History Month. However, a school board in Utah voted to make BHM, what we know as Black History Month, curriculum optional. What can be done to maintain the importance of Black History Month in the United States and abroad? Dr. Holmes?
I think it's in the question. So when you ask how can we make it important, it can only be important if it's important to everybody. And that means that everybody has to understand that Black lives simply matter. Simple as that. And when you understand that and you understand the history of this country, you will give credence to the fact that there needs to be some type of leverage to identify, support, and celebrate the contributions of those of African descent in this country.
I agree. I do want to share. I can remember being in the 8th grade, and I think taking history and reading about the civil rights and the civil rights movement. And then recently, just last year, I was able to participate in the Black Lives Matter movement. I never thought in a million years that I would see something that I was reading about in just a different time era. And I was reflecting, is time repeating itself? What do we do? And I often would read stories about slaves and how they would be beaten, and I would tell my friends, oh, they wouldn't whoop me, they wouldn't beat me, and I would do this and do that, and my mind began to ponder, was this some type of mental transition that our people were going through, or we were forced to do certain things? And so I want to pose the question to you guys. In your option, in your opinion, what is the difference between the civil rights movement, the human rights movement, and Black Lives Matter movement? Any one of you guys can just give some feedback.
Well, let me go back to the notion of Black. I think what we need is to eliminate the Black History Month. What we need is to eliminate Black Lives Matter. And I say that because, and that is when America will actually live up to its calling, where white people will be too excited to participate in programs by white people, and I know I dwelled long on my experience with the church, because that directly has little or nothing to do with Mercer University, okay? But I've been a political animal from very maybe early teen years when Ghana was agitating for its independence. And again, reconciliation. Do you realize the truth of what Dr. King, actually some people have attributed the same observation to Malcolm X. And the statement is that Sunday between the hour of 11 and 12 is the most segregated hour of the week. You may dismiss that as unimportant, but when you realize that we're called as followers of Jesus Christ to engage in the business of reconciliation, then, and you realize what happens when Sunday between the hour of noon and 11 and noon becomes the most segregated hour. Because during the day, during the week, whether you work for Mercer University or Home Depot or Costco or whatever, black and white people interact, co-workers, right? They even go to the lunchroom together. They do more together than Christians do. And they pick the day, Sunday, to show their devotion to Christ whom they follow. And yet, it is the most damning hour, which has led me to say that so long as that hour remains the most segregated hour, then it is no longer the most segregated hour, it is the most unholy hour of the week. And it is damning. And I don't care how brilliantly and movingly your preacher is and how the pulpit, pews are filled up and all that. So long as we're on every Sunday, we look around and you don't see your white sister or your Asian sister, and then we're missing the point. We're engaging in alienation, the very opposite of what we're supposed to be consumed with. So America will only become America true to its own calling when all Americans are Americans, not Black Americans, not Asian Americans. You notice, if you've been following the news, attacks on Asian Americans, especially elderly Asian Americans, as a result of the nonsensical pronouncements over coronavirus. It's China virus, it's Kung flu, and so on. And words have power. And those are the kinds of words too that led to June 6th. So what I'm saying, I'm a dreamer. My dream is that America will work diligently, assiduously to transcend racial divisions and bring about racial reconciliation and make America a beacon to the whole world, in the sense that this is one country where people from every nook and cranny of the world come to live together as brothers and sisters. But of course, until that time, then we will indeed need to continue to celebrate ourselves during Black History Month and throughout the year, and not allow anybody to define us or diminish us in any way, because we are, and we know it, we are children of God.
I think I want to say amen right there. Amen. Preach up. Right now, Dr. Holmes, did you have anything you would like to add?
I could, but if I would, we would be here for another 2 hours. And so I listen, I am so, as they say in the Baptist church, Mr. Oni, I am so full. But listen to you, I want to say a lot, but I'm going to yield and to respect to our time.
Awesome. Well, as we close out, we do have two last questions, and then we can open up the chat box, guests. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and put those in there, and Dr. Booker will make sure I get them, or she can read them however she would like. Chris, Dr. Holmes, I know you've been around Mercer. I know you participated in a lot of activities there on campus. I know personally about you through the Upward Bound program, your contributions to the Upward Bound program, but now serving as the co-host with Catherine with the alumni, I've learned more about you. And so I wanted to get your thoughts and talk about the integration statute that is coming to Mercer by 2022. What are your thoughts about that?
Let me say this about, and you know, Mercer too is a political engine, right? All of these institutions are. And so many things are done with the hopes of building momentum and a belief that people are trying to do the right thing. So in its intent, as a policy major, I support it, you know, integration on all fronts. I know Mercer was not a very integrated place when I was there, and I saw pockets and cultures of people trying to build value among those they know didn't respect them and believe in who they were and what they brought to the table. And so in their effort, I salute that, but let's see it throughout its full implementation, and let it see its full fruition for all the students that they hope to bring in.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Last question for you guys to end tonight's conversation with the Black man. This last question shares, what are your hopes for a more inclusive Mercer, Macon, and the United States? Have at it, guys.
I'll start because I want Mr. Oni to wrap it up because I know he's going to really bring it home. Let me just simply say this. Working in the field of education, I have been changed. I am a young Black boy from the South. And so I went through life with a certain set of beliefs. There were things that I thought were right, and there were things that were obviously wrong in my sight. Being in education, working with children has totally changed me. So when I think of the word inclusion, and not to be spiritual, but inclusion for me is the idea not that I accept your behaviors or that I accept who you are, but it's the idea that I simply love you in spite of. I don't have to agree. And so my hope for Mercer is that they're not looking for the perfect student that fits a mold, but no matter who enters those doors, that you love them for who and what they bring to the table. It is only the idea of love that is going to get us through the amount of hurt and damage that has been caused or called upon the lives of many people. And we're not talking about just Black people anymore. There are so many people in this country, in the city of Macon and at Mercer, that are fighting just to have a voice and to fill up a space that has been divinely called for them to do. And so we have to love better, and then we have to love more. And that's my hope.
Powerful words, Dr. Holmes, powerful words. Mr. Oni, do you have anything you would like to add to wrap us up?
We have, and I think I share this very same words with my dear sister, Ansley. We have, each one of us here, each one of us in this country, who are truly patriotic, not in the sense of January 6th, but a true love that says that seek the very best of this country, that brings out the better angels, to borrow Lincoln's language, of our nature, each one of us. Because this is the only way to unity. And it is also the way to transcend this mythological categorizations of God's children. Jesus never spoke once about white people. The Bible doesn't have a word for Black people. And I have yet to meet a yellow person. And if you think I'm being facetious, when you get home, you pull up any sheet of paper that's yellow or black for that matter, and then look for a Black person. We've wasted so much energy, resources, goodwill in division. And the one institution that would have helped this nation identify it and achieve its true mission of bringing people from all over the world together to form a more perfect union, the church. And the church continues to fail. In this past 4 years, one group of church people, known as the evangelicals, have been unambiguous as to where they stand. And I wish the same evangelical would have shown the same kind of passion after Emmett Till, after Edmund Curtis incident, after Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, and say, those are my brothers and my sisters. We cannot stand by and watch them treated less than our brothers and our sisters. And so for me, America's future greatness, it's inevitable. The church is going to have to come to terms with that. And when it does, then the need for Black History Month and Black Lives Matters and whatever the other side calls itself will be unnecessary, will be rendered irrelevant, and we will be celebrating together our oneness in this one nation. And it seems to me the most sensible thing to do, because we're not going anywhere. This is home. And we might as well have the common sense to say we're going to learn to live with one another in the spirit of brotherhood, sisterhood, and celebrate our oneness as children of God.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both for sharing, highlighting what you guys feel